Thank you. I'm going to shamelessly plug the Institute of Civil Engineers State of the Nation report, which was launched yesterday, and you'll see it covered in the Telegraph, the FT, the Guardian, and the Independent this morning, because it talks about resilience of infrastructure and the role of infrastructure. And that, and its relationship to cities, is complete in that most people are going to live in cities. Now, just talking about resilience, the most resilient issue is actually a diverse economy. Without a diverse economy, cities simply cannot be resilient, either through design or employment or equality or anything else. And that's been proven if you look at New York, survived two major disasters, 9/11, the odd hurricane, and it's resilient because it's wealthy. Other places are not resilient because they're poor. Now, if you look forward with resilience and what it means to design, there is a stark choice. Are we designing for a 2-degree world, or are we designing for a 3 to 4 degree world? At 4 degrees, most scenarios say it's not worth bothering, because only the richest can afford to erect the immigration controls to keep other people out. And that's where 4 degrees takes you, as well as a range of other things. So implicit in actually looking for a resilient 2-degree world, which is where we're going, and I'm using shorthand for that, is the fact that we'll be adapting our cities to a different type of extreme weather event, more extreme and more frequent. And the Met Office with Newcastle, stunning work on that. And that's the reality. We are now going to be designing for a different type of climate profile for all cities in the world. And they are going to be more violent in their extremes. One of the problems with that, though, is we could be digging a bigger carbon hole by the rich and the wealthy cities adapting by more air conditioning, adapting by air conditioning the subways to a greater degree, adapting by actually buying water from other places, which they don't have themselves. That's already happening in California, happening in a whole range of places, and water will become scarce. We already do use desalination in the Thames Valley. We laugh about the Middle East, people living in the desert and not having water, and we desal in London. Somewhat absurd. And going forward, that's going to be, again, the role of the privilege. Now, applying that to cities and city designers, city fabric has two parts. It has infrastructure and public space, and it has buildings, very crudely. Buildings actually need to be far more efficient. They need to use less resources. They need to emit less heat. They need to actually counter the effect of heat islands. And that's what designers are about. It's not about flexibility, because buildings are flexible. And most buildings built for flexibility get marooned in isolation and never changed. If you look at the number of buildings designed to be ultimately flexible, they've never changed, whereas everything else has been adapted. Whereas public space, the bits between the buildings, including the way you use transit systems, the way you use sidewalks, the priorities at intersections, needs to be ambiguous. It needs to adapt to different social groups behaving in different social ways with different types of economy, different types of modal split, different types of information technology. And that is a real challenge, actually, not to let too many architects design public space, because they tend to be a bit specific. And there's all sorts of examples there. You can look at Chiswick Park, some great architecture, but the landscape is pure art. It never moves in the last 15 years. It doesn't evolve. You look at good city streetscapes, the way we use squares, the way we use streets changes. You move the curb. And that's one of the great resiliences. But allowing people the dignity to travel to a variety of jobs within a city safely, with dignity, with a sense of arrival, with a sense of journey, is the role of the public space. The role of the buildings is to give you objects that work really well, maybe look nice, maybe don't look nice, but actually are incredibly efficient. A real conundrum to go forward, but are you doing it with more carbon intensity? Are you doing it with the 80% mitigation of carbon that we have by law in the UK? And actually, if you look what Obama's doing with 30% cutting greenhouse gases in power supply, that's his way of adapting to it. And there's about 126 countries with actually decarbonising legislation of one sort or another that affects the urban fabric are actually in place now. And how many of the design community, the design, the construction, the suppliers, the material suppliers, have actually engaged in that trend? And the trend is an accelerating one. Interestingly, I'd say the built environment is probably 5 years behind the automotive and probably 10 years behind aerospace, where people have bet their companies on new technology. The Dreamliner, the A380, the new electric cars, the iterations of new electric cars, the BMW i3, completely different from the old hybrids that I drive. And there's going to be a real acceleration of that. And have we done that with the built environment? Do we have buildings which are using a tenth of the input they were before, while still allowing a decent and flexible workspace that other people can come and do different things in? I don't think we have. So there's a real role to actually start to play with the way we look at our built environment, not to expect cities to be solved instantly, but to look at incremental and coordinated changes. And one of the drivers for that is to change standards. As an industry, we usually watch standards being developed over the years and then complain that we don't like the way they're applied. To be creative as an industry, we actually need to be people that develop standards and apply them on a time frame and cycle that instead of being 5 to 10 years is in 18 months. If the phone industry developed phones on a cycle time the way we do standards for buildings, you wouldn't have an iPhone. You'd have a tin can with a string, because that would be the rate of progress you'd have been locked into. So it's a very interesting dynamic. We are on the cusp of some real changes in the way we run cities. The data is there, the information and ability to move it is there. All those apps are coming. So it's not a problem of technology. It's a problem of values and the way we govern and the way we have an interplay between public space, private space, transportation systems, and the economy. A phenomenal challenge, and one actually which things like BASE need to encourage. But we are locked into a choice. Do we dig a bigger carbon hole and hope that the 500,000 people crossing the Mediterranean now won't turn into 11 million or 100 million? Or do we actually look to radically change our carbon profile of the built environment? And it's not somebody else. It is everything. It's the power supply. It's the way we have a circular economy, which again, State of the Nation says, we've done our bit with recycling. The next step, effectively in the UK, is to go to a circular economy. So we should be designing in the way we reuse things rather than just putting it in different bins when you finish at the end of the house. So an interesting one. It's the right time to actually do things differently. And as one environmental minister said, he got actually fired and put in jail, but Chris Hume actually said to the CBI Climate Change Committee, in 10 years, half of you people will be bankrupt, because that's what industrial revolutions do, and climate change is actually an industrial revolution, and its cities are fundamental to that. Thank you.